Hello friends, you're the Lonesome Gamer, and I wanted to play Nemesis today again. The Kickstarter, the second wave shipping arrived, so I ended up with quite a few expansions here and a lot of new stuff, and that's all pretty cool. But sadly, last week, on Wednesday, one of the greatest and most influential game designers of all time died in the age of 83, and I'm talking about Francis Tresham. For those who don't know him, he was the guy who did Civilization, and he was also the guy who invented the 18XX system with 1829, later with 1830. And I think it is safe to say that the gaming the whole game designs would have gone another way without these two games. These were games that brought many people into the hobby, especially Civilization. I remember it was a big deal in the 80s, even here in Europe, where nobody cared about American games, or very little people. But that was really a very, very important game here in Europe. And I think even modern classics like Catan or Ticket to Ride, games that brought many people into the hobby, these games clearly derived from these two designs. So just to give you an idea how important and influential this guy actually was. And therefore I decided to do Nemesis maybe the next time, and yeah, I want to do 1853. I already did 1830, the other one of his designs that I own. I don't own 1825 or 29, but yeah, I did 1830. So yeah, I'm gonna do 1853 today, and the yeah, it is set in India, and it is a very different game, especially compared to 1830. The ratings are not that high for 18XX standard. Many people don't seem to really like it that much, because it is more for engineers and less about the stock market thing. But it is a game that I still enjoy a lot, and yeah, so let's set it up. So the game is set up, and as you can see, it is a huge map of India here. Yeah, hard to give you I mean, these are the tiles just for scale, right? So yeah, it's really a big map, and we have here the shares of 8 companies. The bank pool down here. Up here is the train pool. I didn't set this up yet because it might change depending on the starting of a minor company in the first stock round or not, or in the first stock round. The yeah, the denomination of trains will change depending on that fact. Basically, there will be simply, I think, less trains in there if no minor company starts during the first stock round. Over here we have the market, the stock market, and you can see this is definitely different than what you know from games like 1830. It is a 2D stock market, just in one direction. But it's also different than, for example, in 1846, because here really every company has its own line, and it kind of feels a little like a racetrack here, and maybe it is a little bit like that. So by the way, this game was published by, this edition was published by Lookout Games. I think not sure. I'm not sure who actually has, let me see if there's something written about this is probably the second edition, I think. Yeah, that's a second edition. Also with a few rule changes. It seems like the first edition seemed to be pretty much a disaster from what I've read. Many people were really complaining about that it is a game which is super, super complex, and the rules are often ambiguous and vague, and the game is hard to play, and there were many house rules then that were done. And yeah, this game seems to have streamlined the rules and even incorporated some of these house rules, which became after a while kind of semi-official rules or so. So yeah, this is basically now a clearly modernized game. I don't know if that's better. I haven't played the old one, but it's pretty much what most people say. Okay, so just before we go deeper into this, I want to say that I'm not explaining all the standard rules of 18xx in this game. If you don't know 18xx, please watch my 1830 video, which maybe gives you an introduction. At least I'm trying to do it. This is definitely some advanced stuff here, and there are a lot of things different than in most other 18xx games. So first of all, usually you start with an auction for the privates. In this game there are no private companies. However, there still is an auction. Players make a contract with the government of Britain, and they will basically offer a bond that they will get back when they fulfilled their contract. And to do this, they will have to connect a specific amount of cities. And the number of cities is written here. So it can be 3 to 6 cities in a 4-player game, and players will write down secretly which cities they promise to connect. There are restrictions to this, especially about the cities here in the Ganges area, which is this darker brown area, and Calcutta. You can only take a limited amount of cities in your contract. Okay. From what I understand, the British government was not too interested in connecting these cities at the beginning of the railroad construction, simply because the river always was an important connection there for trade, and the British government was more interested in connecting other cities in India. Okay, obviously it makes sense to promise to connect cities that will give you a good revenue. Okay? And you have these green cities here, and all of them give you a higher revenue at the beginning compared to these smaller cities, which give you just the 20%. Most interesting cities are definitely Bombay for 40, Delhi for 40, but especially Calcutta, which gives already 50 right at the beginning. Might be interesting to see that there are no off-board areas here where you can get any money from. We have gray tiles here, so you can upgrade to these gray tiles from brown. And you can see here we have a single C or D tile, which means one of the two cities, Calcutta or Delhi, can reach a value of 100, which is obviously very high. So in the end, these are your most valuable cities. What's special in this game is companies may not operate everywhere on the map. I mean, that is, yeah, exactly. That's an important factor here. So, for example, here you can see this company may only operate in this northwestern area of India. Or this one here is kind of in the central area, and so on. This one here, for example, in the south. Later in the game, these restrictions are not that strict anymore. You can expand a little more, but especially at the beginning of the game, this will set you clear limits of where you can operate and where not. So the way this bidding process works now, that every player will secretly or will write down a bid, okay? And then the bid is revealed, and this will determine the seeding order from highest to lowest. Then the first player writes down a city secretly, and each city has a number. This here, for example, we have a small 8. Here we have a 4 and a 6. This one here goes 1, 2, 3, 5. So each city comes with one or more numbers. And these numbers tell you which companies are allowed to operate in this city. So when you write down such a name, you are allowed, and you have to, take a share of one of the companies that are allowed to operate there. You're not going to get that share for free. You're going to have to pay it after this bidding action, but this share is kind of reserved for you. So if you're interested in getting shares of a specific company and you want to make sure you get quite a few, you might be interested in placing a higher bid. So yeah, you might have better odds in getting more shares. You won't get the presidency right at the beginning. You really start only with one share, and the presidency will then be determined after the first stock round, if I'm not mistaken here. So basically this process goes around the table. Every player writes a secretly a city and takes one of the shares. In addition to that, players basically subtract the value, the revenue that the city will give from their contract bid. And when there's no more money left in the contract bid, players will have to pass. Okay, they can only connect as many cities as they have invested in the contract, or up to the maximum number, which is 6 in a 4-player game. You can also pass before, but you have to have written down the minimum number, which is 3, and you are not allowed to have 40 or more pounds in your contract left when you pass. Let's take a closer look at these companies here. What's important to understand is that these companies all start at a fixed price. So there is no par price. All the shares that are sold here from the initial offer are sold at the price which is written here on the share. And this is also indicated here. So this is the starting price for the companies. And yeah, obviously this one here, number 1, is the leftmost company, and that is also the most expensive company, and then it gets cheaper and cheaper. The companies 1 to 4 are major companies. Companies 6 to 8 are minor companies. Company 5 could be both, depending on the starting bid. If a player wants to start Company 5 and his bid includes Bombay and Ajmer, then it will be a major company, otherwise it's a minor company. So now, before we look into the companies in detail, where they are and so on, it's important to understand that, yeah, the difference between the minors. I mean, obviously the minor companies have a lower share value, which could be also an advantage, especially at the beginning of the game, because you can buy more shares from a single company. Of course, they will have less money in the treasury to begin with. Now, major companies have 2 starting spaces, always. Minor companies only have a single starting space. Major companies are allowed at the beginning with a restriction, later in the game without restrictions. They would be allowed to lay 2 tiles per operating round. Minor companies may only lay a single tile. That's a big problem for minor companies, I think, especially at the beginning of the game. Actually, I think if I would play, I would never go for a minor company at the beginning of the game. Because this limit of 1 tile compared to the other 2 tile companies, I think this is a big, big issue. And but I might be wrong, you know. I'm more used to these typical 1830 style games. So maybe I'm wrong here, and this is a total different approach here. An advantage minor companies have, and I want to go to this in more detail later, is but they're going to have access to this smaller train, which is also significantly cheaper. The majors can only run the 2 train at the beginning, which is $300. The minors can run a 1M train for $180. That train cannot make as much money because it can only basically connect 1 city and an unlimited number of dots. The 2 train can connect 2 cities and an unlimited number of dots. In this game, you can have as many dots on your route as you want. So yeah, the 2 train obviously gives more money than the 1 train, but it's also much more expensive. Yeah, so maybe this is an advantage for minor companies. I'm not so sure about that, to be honest. Have a quick look at the companies now. Company number 1, the East Indian Railway, starts up here, Calcutta and Patna. Okay, and yeah, this is a Calcutta gives you the $50, which is amazingly good. Up here is Delhi for $40, so this is definitely a rich area up here. It also starts, of course, with a very high share value. Advantage, higher share value also rises, you know, the steps between the different spaces, the money gain becomes bigger here, the more expensive the share gets. But it doesn't quite follow this rule. Basically, you have here in the center steps of $4. So it goes from, I don't know, I think from 80 to 84 to 88, 92, 96, 100, 104. And then it goes $5, $6, $7, and so on. Interestingly though, down here, it starts also with 70, then you have a $5 step, then another $5 step, and if you go even lower, you have even higher steps. So maybe it's not that bad to invest in a lower company, in a lower value company. You get more shares for the money, and at least at the beginning, you will also get a little more money per share, possibly. Okay, the second company here is the Great Indian Peninsula Railway. And that is company number 2, and that starts here, Allahabad, and interestingly down here in Bombay. So these are pretty far apart. Could be an advantage. I'm not sure about that. The next one is then the, wait a minute. That's a little odd. Is that, gosh, 1, 2, it should be a blue one, shouldn't it? That is kind of strange. Is it that one? Wait a minute. Northwestern Railway. Why is this one? Why is that number 3 and the other one number? I'm considering to exchange them. That I find that very, very odd. So I think, yeah, I think I'm going to prefer this way here. Okay, so the next one is then the Northwestern Railway. That is company number 3, and yeah, it makes more sense. Also, the price goes down. And this is sitting here in Delhi and here north in Lahore. So, I mean, this is not the most profitable area. There are a few cities up here, maybe you can see them, but not so many rich cities. Delhi is a good city. The problem is the train, the track goes out in this direction. So if I want to go in this more rich area, I basically got to go around Delhi. I don't know. The next one would be then here, the B&R, the Bengal Nagpur Railway. And that is number 4. And it starts also here in Calcutta and in Nagpur. Well, still Calcutta, a good place to make money. Maybe there is also down here Voltaire, possible. Okay, now these companies all are major companies, and the next one is this kind of possible major company. Company number 5, starting in Ajmer and possibly in Bombay. I think you could add Bombay, my goodness. And then it's a major company. company number 6, the Madras and South Maratha Railway, Maratha, is down here, and that is now a minor company. Hard to tell. I mean, they could make a quick connection to Valtair, but there are very little dots in between, and dots are good in this game. They might go to Bombay. There are dots here, so that is an option. Of course, they also have right next to them these 2 cities, which are not terribly valuable, but still they're just around the corner. Then we got the South Indian Railway, another minor company, which is sitting here. And I think this is a company which is kind of seriously willing to go for the dots. They can use all these, they're all here, right, and here, this area. So they can try to connect all these small towns. But on the other hand, also here, there are 3 towns right next to each other. The last company is the East Coast Railway, an 8, sitting here in Valtair. Well, I mean, the interesting part of that one is it can make a fairly quick connection to Calcutta, and it's also not too far away from Madras. So, although it's very cheap, maybe it's an interesting option. I have no clue. So, I'm at the end of this contract bidding process, and the seating order changed a little. But of course it's not that important because, well, the players are basically just player number 1, number 2, and so on. So, okay, anyway, these first players that bid the most, they both placed a bid of 100. They were interested in company number 1. And by the way, I randomized it, but in a way that I gave higher odds to the companies that I think are more profitable. For me, that is especially companies number 1. I think that's the most profitable company. Then company number 2, which is sitting here too, and 4, which Calcutta and Nagpur. I think 5 is still an interesting company because it can quickly hook up to this area and to India, and to Delhi, but I think it's not quite as good as the others. Then in the next tier, I have basically companies 3 and 8. 3 goes up here. There is not that much money, but it's at least still Delhi. 8 is sitting here. It's a small company which is, in my opinion, a disadvantage, but it can go to Calcutta and Madras. So in general, the area is not that bad, I think. I think the real bad companies are 7 and 6, at least at the beginning, simply because small companies, they are limited in expansion. And especially if you start a company alone down here, you know, I mean, if you... yeah, I mean, what I mean is they work basically alone, right? If I start a company here, which is also a minor company, I can be pretty sure that people will working hard in this area and there will be already a good connection. So I probably have a good chance after 3 or 4 tiles placement to hook up with these guys and then also make good money, right? But down here, if I start here, I'll be on my own and I can only lay a single tile, and I don't know if that's a great idea. I really doubt that. Similar to 6, I mean, they could say, okay, we could work together, but the problem is that Madras goes out in this direction. And so it will, even if they work together, it would take a while until they could hook up. They might not be interested in crossing these two cities, so that's really then a big deal to somehow find a connection. Of course, the 6 and the 8 could work together, make a connection like this, but there's nothing in here. And 2 and 6 could work together. There's a lot of dots in here, Hyderabad. But then again, the player of the 2 says, hey, why would I work with you? I can make much more money in this area, so I might not be interested in working with you. Okay, so that means these guys ended up with a bid. The first player wrote down Nagpur, no, that's not true actually. Yeah, Nagpur, Delhi, Patna and Benares. So these are basically, yeah, Delhi, Benares is here, Patna is here, and Nagpur. And there can be only 2 in this area, including Calcutta. This is a restriction that comes from the rules. Player 2 did exactly the same. First, one of them was thinking investing in company 5, Ajmer, down here. But then when they realized, hey, nobody else is doing that, they realized, hey, the company will probably not float and I will lose money. So he decided, and that's the reason why you write down one city after another, player by player, you know, not just all the cities simultaneously. You can see which companies will float and which won't. So that means that when he realized, hey, nobody's going to float company 5, so I don't want a share of that company, he then also decided to add Nagpur to his cities, because he realized that this guy down here is actually going for the Bengal-Nagpur railway, and that it's going to float. Also, this guy already did write down Nagpur, so he thought, yeah, that can be a profitable share. Player 3, this guy here, as I said, he invested in company 4, and he said Nagpur, Calcutta, Allahabad. He only did bid on 3. Oh fuck. Wait a second, I might have made a mistake here. That's the problem. I think actually okay, if there are only 3 cities, only one of these 5 cities is allowed to be part of them. Kanpur, Lucknow, Allahabad, Benares and Patna. Oh no, you can't choose Calcutta in addition. Yeah, this is a little bit confusing. There are lots of restrictions when it comes to these cities, and it depends on how many bids you do and whatever, how many cities you write down, and it's a little tricky. Yeah, so he actually did Nagpur, Calcutta, Allahabad. So Allahabad is the city here in the Ganges area. Then he added Calcutta and Nagpur. And finally, player 4, this guy down here, he started the Northeastern Railway. He wrote down Lahore, Delhi and Rawalpindi. So Delhi, Lahore, and here in the north, Rawalpindi. He wanted to make a connection there. I don't know if it's that clever. Maybe I should have gone for here, but now it's a little late, I guess. Yeah. Okay, whatever. So, now at that point, every player basically simply took himself shares, one for each city. And now they got to pay for these shares from highest to lowest value. But before they do that, they got to give away the money they have invested in their contract. So these players each invested $100. The other guys invested 90 and 80. Okay, so this is the money, and this is put aside in a cup, and this is not part of the bank. Player will get their money back as soon as their cities are connected. And it does not matter who actually does it, or even if the connection is blocked, doesn't matter. There just has to be a connection between the cities, and then they will get back the money. So they are definitely interested in connecting these cities. Then players have to pay for the shares they gained. If they could not do it, they kind of still keep the shares, and they got to rotate them then just like this to indicate they couldn't pay for them. These are unredeemed shares. They don't give a dividend, but they are still held by the players, and the player is not allowed to buy any other share before he actually paid for this one. And I think he is also not allowed to sell the share. Yeah, exactly. He cannot sell those shares too. So now I'm gonna do the payment for the shares. I think everybody should be, everybody is able to pay for the shares without a problem. So now we go into the first stock round, and we have here this famous elephant, which inspired also lots of other 18xx games as a priority deal marker. And it derives from this game. And so this player is holding the elephant here, number one. Problem is he doesn't have any money. He has, but he cannot use it to start to buy more shares. Reason is, shares that were not part, or shares not of companies which were part in this contract, in the bidding contract at the beginning, are now removed from the game. They can be started later, they can be purchased later, but for now, only shares of the companies involved in this starting contract may be purchased. Once they all are sold out, the remaining shares will come into play. So the problem is that the cheapest share right now is an 88 share, and this guy simply doesn't have the money to do it. Same thing here. In the first stock round, you could sell shares, but you could only sell them for $5 less than you than the actual price, and that is probably also not in their interest. Now the stock rounds work differently here. There are lots of differences compared to 1830. First of all, stock round will not end after each player passed. Well, it will end that way too, but it also will end after all players consecutively didn't buy a share. So selling alone does not guarantee you to be available to do future actions in a stock round, because a stock round could end before it's your turn again. And also the priority goes to the player next to the player who last purchased a share in a stock round. Another big deal is you can sell any number of shares of a given company in the bank pool. So there is no limit here. And you can even sell the presidency to the bank pool. The company will then be led by a manager, and we'll get to this later in the game if we can see it. Big deal, selling shares does not change the share value. The numbers of shares that have to be sold out of the initial offer to float a company, and also the maximum number of shares that can be held of a given company, depends on the player number. So to make a company operate, we gotta buy 50% of that company, and you can hold up to 6 shares or 60% of a given company. It's kind of interesting. If you play with 6 players, you can hold only 40% of a company. That's very unusual, I think, that you cannot hold a majority of shares of your own company. Let me see what else is different. You cannot buy and sell shares of the same company in one stock turn. Once a company has floated, you're not allowed to sell shares of that company in that stock round anymore. There is an exception in the first stock round. There are actually a few exceptions that only apply in the first stock round. Another thing is you cannot buy the presidency of a company. You will get the presidency of a company as soon as you hold 2 shares. So the first player who holds 2 shares of the company will get the presidency, but you just buy 1 share after another. That also changes things quite a bit, because you cannot have, the thing is, you simply cannot have, how can I explain that? Your advantage when you start a company, basically, compared to other players, there is a lesser advantage, because you don't buy 2 shares and then the others can only buy each 1, but everybody buys 1 share. So that makes, for example, the chance, you have a lesser chance to get more shares of a company that you started compared to the other players. You see if there is something else that I missed here. Actually, I don't think so. Yeah, the shares down here below 40%, $40, they do not count against the certificate limit. And I think that's pretty much it here. Oh, one funny part, yeah. The very last thing in a stock round, the guy who holds priority at the end of the stock round, he is actually allowed to sell priority to another player for a minimum of 1. Now, priority in this game is not as valuable and as critical as in most other 18xx games, especially in games of the 1830 branch. Otherwise, it would be ridiculous, right? It could completely I mean, it would be nearly impossible to invest in other players' companies because you never know where priority ends up at the end of the stock round. So it would be super risky to do that. But here, because you are always allowed to sell the presidency, it's not a big deal, actually. I mean, it's or at least it's not that terrible to when the priority changes in a way that you didn't plan ahead. There are a few exceptions in the first stock round. As I said, for example, that shares maybe only sold for $5 left. And another interesting factor is that the director of a new company is determined at the end of the stock round, not as soon as the company, as he gets 2 shares. I don't really understand why, to be honest. Yeah, I don't know. I gotta think about that sometimes. Okay. Players down here, they still have money simply because their initial bid wasn't that high, and they also didn't have to pay as much for their shares. So this guy has 200 something. So he can definitely afford more shares. Now the company is already floated. His company, the Bengal Nagpur Railway, there are already 5 shares sold. So he doesn't have to be afraid of that anymore. Now let's see how much money we have. We might consider investing in, well, there are actually 2 of these left. As I said, you're not allowed to buy the presidency. So, but there are 2 shares of those left, and I could afford those. And I think that sounds like a very good idea. So, I might go for that. The interesting thing is that if this guy wants to float his company, he's got to do that alone. That's the way it looks like. He can do it, but then he will not be able to buy other shares. Now what he could do at that point, and that is, well, first, as I said, I'm going to buy one of these because I think these are good shares for $100. Okay. Now, I mean, he could say at that point, you know, I'm going to sell these shares again. I will lose $15, but maybe buying shares of company 1 or 4 is more profitable. Let's see how much shares. I mean, this guy can afford 1 more, right? So that means there will be then only 4 shares left, because right now only 5 shares apart from this are available. That means if he buys 1 of them, 4 are left. So I would basically, I think that's not a great idea. If I continue buying these shares, I would be able to get 5 of those. Otherwise, I end up with 4 shares. They might be better, but I will lose some starting money right away. And I'll sit on less shares. So I think it's probably not worth it. But I think it's still kind of an interesting decision. I'm not sure if it is total nonsense because, yeah, I don't know, man. I think actually on a... Yeah. Do I want to roll a die for that or not? On a 6 I'm going to think about it. Okay, no, I'm not. It's a 2, so I will hold on to my shares and simply invest in additional shares of the company. But you know, the problem is I already have a bad feeling about this whole situation here. But it's a long game, but I think yeah, I think in a game like 1830, where you need a ton of starting, where you want to make money very quick, as fast as possible, this guy would be already in a very, very questionable position here. Because he's probably going to have to work alone there, and I don't know how profitable his shares will be. But this company is in general a problem. But okay, it was his choice now. So we're at the end of the stock round. Nobody is interested to spend any money for priority at that point. So that means the directorships go now to the players. And the players with the most shares, as usual, get directorship. If there is a tie, then the player who has held the shares longer will get the directorship. So that means this is now exchanged for the presidency. And it's kind of interesting because you can basically, in the first operating round, you can only buy 9 shares of a company. Because, or does that even make sense? No, you can only buy 80% of the company, because you're not allowed to buy the president's certificate. So only 80% of any given company will be available. That's a weird situation, I think. Okay, then this guy also gets his presidency. And also him. Cool. Then the companies will float, and we're going to place the station markers. And these are not, they're not these cool symbols here. These are simply just different colored markers. And we have these cubes here for this track. So it's not your nice symbols with the that you find on the company's charters like this or something. But that's okay. So I've set up the trains now, and it's kind of interesting how many trains actually are removed. We got a 2 train is removed. All these other 2 or 1 M trains are removed. And then we got these other meter trains also removed. All because no minor company was started in the first operating round. Or in the first stock round. Okay, so we're basically ready to go now with the first operating round, but I think it's already good enough to load up the first video here. I don't want to become it too long, because the first operating round might also be a long video, because I want to go quite a bit into detail. Well, we'll see about that. Anyway, I'm going to load this up. Hope to see you on the next video or on lonesomegamer.com. Bye.